So we fired him, and I said, Rick, you got to go in there and do the deal. 2 weeks later, he comes back and he says, Jamal, guess what? I got a number for you. I said, okay, what's the number? I got 33 and a half. What you want to do?
Wow.
Rick had never negotiated an NBA contract in his life.
Living my best life like it's supposed to be. Wake up, feeling good, even looking better. I don't know if it's the smile, the cash, or the sweater, but everything is lovely when the sun is out. We trying to have a good time is what I'm talking about. Cookouts, barbecues, and the fish fries. Blue lights, basement parties, I ain't never lied. Okay, I made it through the rough time. I made it through the tough time. I made it through the bad time.
And hello, you're joining us on this episode of Bailey and Buck Unplugged, sponsored by How to Wed today. I am the CEO of the Kennedy Kids Foundation. I am also your celebrity event planner and alumni NFL cheerleader. I am joined today by someone I met through my prior career, Mr. Robert Bailey, who is our two-time Super Bowl national champion, ESPY award winner, Guinness Book of World Record holder for the longest punt return in the NFL, president of Rosenhaus Sports, and Kennedy Kids Foundation, which our podcast directly benefits. Today also joining us is our super amazing co-host, Misty Buck. She is our resident guru on all things mental health, author of the Athlete Mental Health Playbook, and celebrity health and wellness coach to the stars. Misty is also a very big supporter of the Kennedy Kids Foundation, as she is one of our board members. And today on our episode of Bailey and Buck Unplugged, I am so excited to introduce to you business tycoon since the age of 19, 12 plus year NBA All-Star legend, and husband of the century, also smartest person I know, Mr. Jamal Mashburn. Bring him in. Welcome.
Hey, wow. That was great. Husband of the century. I love it. For the viewers and the listeners out there, Jamal is Bailey's husband and partner and best friend and all the great things that come with husband and wife. We are excited to have you on, Jay. Thank you so much, man. You are you've accomplished so much in basketball, and we're happy to have you on to continue this journey that Bailey and Buck podcast is on to talk to entertainers and athletes and everybody above that to let the public really know that mental health affects us all. And so we decided to start this podcast to bring light to that. And we can't thank you enough for coming on, man. Really. And it's the first.
So surprised he said yes. I was so surprised you said yes, because I know how many no's you dish out on a regular basis, especially to me in person. I mean, I do get a lot of yeses too, but this is a little one-sided. So I've got insider information, so I'm going to kick us off today. One of the things that I wanted to bring up was just some of the stuff that like other people typically don't ask on these podcasts, because Jamal does get invited to a lot of stuff, and I hear the information, and a lot of the podcasters are asking the same question. So a little insider tip. So Jamal was recruited by Rick Pitino, who everybody knows in the NBA. And then he also played for Pat Riley, who is iconic for the Miami Heat. And then those are coaches that impacted him throughout his life. But there is somebody that I personally know had the greatest of all impacts on him, and that was Coach Reginald Kitchens, if I said that correctly. So I would love for you to share how you met Reginald and why he was such a great impact on your life.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Bailey. And thanks, y'all, for having me. It's a pleasure to be a part of your platform to help spread the word about mental health and also Kennedy Kids Foundation. When you talk about mental health, for me, that's where it starts for me. Growing up in Harlem, New York, and meeting a lot of people. It's a concrete jungle, as we spoke about it off camera. And you deal with a lot of issues. And I grew up in a single parent household. My mom, Helen, raised me. My father was a part of my life, but, he left when I was 10 years old. So, I felt a little bit abandoned when my father left the house. And I was always not necessarily searching for adult male mentorship, because there's a part of my life where I just rejected a lot of coaches because they were male, and how I saw that and different things like that. So I didn't necessarily gravitate toward them. I always fought against them. And if I felt like they didn't have my best interest in heart or wasn't being honest with me, that's when, I would say attitude or just resistance popped up. And when you're not a professional basketball, when you become good at basketball or good at some things, you have leverage. And when you have leverage, I was one of those guys that understood that at 13 years old of what type of leverage I had. So I resisted all type of people. But late in my NBA career, a gentleman was in my practice facility. His name was Reginald Kitchen, and he was from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Played basketball. He was 60 years old at the time. And he was working out one of my other teammates. His name is George Lynch, that played in North Carolina. And, Reginald was standing on the side and he was watching for probably about 3 or 4 days before he engaged me. And I was walking off the practice court, and he said, "Come here, young fella." And I said, "What's up?" And he said, "I'm Reginald Kitchen. Just want to introduce myself. You remind me a lot of Oscar Robertson." And I followed Oscar Robertson, actually got a chance to know Oscar Robertson. And I don't know, everybody knows the story of Oscar Robertson, Hall of Fame basketball player, but he was also the creator, along with other players, of the NBPA, the Players Association.
Right.
Which gave players the opportunity, at least to unionize at that particular point, to bargain for better salary, healthcare, all these different things, player movement, free agency, and all these different things. So when he made that comment about Oscar Robertson, my mind automatically went to the whole totality of Oscar Robertson, not just the basketball player. And as me and Reginald Kitchen developed a better relationship, that was exactly what he was referencing. And that's how we became connected. He was my spiritual advisor, one of my best friends. He passed away from kidney failure. And a lot of people don't know Reginald Kitchen in his later years lived in Atlanta, but he has also put over 200 kids in Division I basketball.
Wow.
In the area. I'm talking about guys like Grant Hill, Dennis Scott, just to name a few that he has impacted.
Wow.
Credit for. And as he built a relationship with me, he was the only male that I really gravitated to, that I would listen to, but he would often not talk to me about basketball. He's the one that helped me coin the phrase, because it was his phrase, "Jamal, I just use basketball as a backdrop for life, to engage people in life." And that's how he kind of nurtured it and developed relationships with young men. We can talk about the game, but there's parallels of the game that are 100% beneficial in life. Things such as time management, how to deal with failure, how to deal with success, how to deal with relationships, how to deal with money, how to say no. And one of the biggest things that I got from him was, he said, "Jamal, this is when I decided to retire." He gave me a little pamphlet of a book that he would use, and it was probably about 30 pages. And it talked about the title of it. I can't remember the title, but the basis of the book was called "Get Away Clean." And what that meant was, how do you leave a situation not being dirty, essentially, from all the stuff that you've encountered along that journey, so that when you embark on your new journey, you walk out of it clean. A clean perspective, clean in your heart, clean in your spirit, so that you can make better choices for that particular moment while learning from the past, but not carrying it with you.
Wow.
And so those are some of the things that connected with me. And sitting down with Reginald Kitchen, it started to remind me that I had this thought process since I was 9 to 10 years old, but I was often isolated because I didn't have anybody else that thought like me, and I refused to give into the part of falling in line with others, because I knew I was correct and I knew I was right, but I didn't have anybody to necessarily validate it, confirm it, or affirm it for me at some level. So I've always, I'm the only child. I've always walked this existence, I would say solo, but with a lot of guides along the way, that helped me along the way. And he was a big part of my decision to retire from basketball as well. at the time it was called the New Orleans Hornets. Now it's the New Orleans Pelicans, because I was a part of the franchise that left from Charlotte that moved to New Orleans. I was their first all-star on that team. And the New Orleans Hornets had offered me, I think at the end of my second year of my contract, I think I was in my, I want to say 11th year, they offered me at that time 2 years, $24 million. And I was struggling with it. And I was just like, I don't know about this. Most guys would have been ecstatic, would have been happy and all these different things about it. And I just struggled with it and then sat with it for a couple of days. And Reginald Kitchen came over to the house and he was like, what are you thinking about doing? And I said, I'm going to turn it down and I'm going to retire. And he was like, really? And I told him my reasons why I wanted to continue my business career. And then I also saw where I was not going to grow much in the NBA. Quick story, I was with one of the owners, the main owner at a charity event. And Robert, you know this, the star players sit at the head table.
At the head table, yeah.
They highlight you at the community. So I tried to engage the majority owner at that particular time because I know he was in the car business. And I'm in the car business and was in the car business at that time. I started the car business, I want to say back in 1994, 95. And I'd already built up a portfolio with me and my business partner. And I wanted to chat with him about his experience in the car business. And he wanted nothing to do with it. And I got it through the table. And that was the day I officially retired and didn't look back. And had still some years on my contract. They never came to me and asked me for a buyout because I negotiated my second contract and actually my first contract myself.
Wow.
And that's a whole nother story. And I know you represent players and I can give you.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, like back in that time, guys always had agents. Now you hear a few guys that, but it's interesting that back then you did something that not many guys did.
Oh, it gets worse, Robert. Jamal, go ahead and share how you selected who you were going to work with when Pitino put them in front of you.
So part of my agreement with Coach Pitino was I was a 17-year-old kid out of Harlem, and I'm pretty young, graduating at that age at that particular time.
Yeah.
And I was a top 25 player at that time. And before that, I played for an organization called the Gauchos. And the Gauchos is a prolific organization out of New York. And we travel around the country, around the world, and play basketball. I mean, even before there was quote unquote AAU, it was the Gauchos traveling all over the place. So I went to St. Louis at 13 years old, Vegas, all these different places, even played at correctional facilities,
Wow.
against other inmates. And that's just some of the things that they kind of put together. And all my teammates were highly recruited. And as a 13-year-old, I always played up above my age group.
Right.
And I'm a guy that asks a lot of questions. I'm always very curious. And my mom taught me early to raise your hand if you don't know. There's no dumb questions or anything like that. So she gave me the courage and confidence to do that. So I was always asking my teammates, how are you guys making a decision to sign at a college? What's your process? Some of them told me they were getting paid, different things like that, or they followed the team when they were young or whatever. And they grew up in their house and they followed all these players or coaches or whatever. And I thought that wasn't good enough for me. So Coach Pitino came calling. University of Kentucky was on probation at the time. And I decided to flip the recruiting process. And instead of them telling me what they can do for me, I said, if you're already sitting there, you already know what I can do for you.
Wow.
So what can you do to me beyond this basketball thing? Because we're going to win games. I ain't going to worry about that because if you're recruiting me, you think I can help you.
This is at 17. This is Carrie having a conversation with Richard Pitino.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So
We're Killian.
So we're sitting there and we're chatting. And I said, forget that speech that you want to tell me about the history and tradition of Kentucky. Don't care. Really don't care.
Did you think the streets of New York, do you think that in New York, that light helped you handle these situations? Was that a part of it? And you could continue with your story, but I just want to know where do you get that maturity at that level?
I was my mom. My mom really. My mother was a bookkeeper for the New York City Housing Authority, and my dad was a professional boxer, and then became an NYPD officer. After that, my dad fought Larry Holmes, Ken Norton, sparred with Muhammad Ali. So I saw professional sports at a young age at the underbelly of it, meaning that he wasn't the 1% that was making money. And people thought about professional sports, you thought about people living in mansions, penthouses, and all these different things. I'm living in the projects. So there's something a little bit disconcerting about that, where it just doesn't match up. So you realize that, you know, you got to have other interests and other things to do. Because I saw my father walk away or take shots or take matches on short notice. I remember my dad taking a dial on a fight, and I'm sitting there ringside crying, and he winks at me while he's on the canvas. And he saw how upset I was, but he had to do what he had to do to get that
Right.
Oh
Right.
my God.
So that really shaped me in a lot of ways, of really understanding what professional sports was about. That necessarily wasn't about the glitz and the glamour. It was about, you know, you're a commodity at the end of the day. And if you perform, you perform. But also you got to make the right choices to align this up with the right people, and different things like that. So getting back to the recruiting part of it, a lot of coaches came into the home, and the thing that I would lead with is I want to carry a briefcase and be a professional basketball player. And I had Hall of Fame coaches laugh at me in my face and tell me, why do you want to do that? And I nixed them right out the door. You know, I even had coaches put money on the table, and I looked at one coach. He's no longer coaching, and I won't mention any names. And at 17 years old, I said, "Man, that's short money. I'm looking for long money." And that's just how I kind of my mindset. It was my mom that gave me that courage, because she took me around New York City and took me outside of Harlem and exposed me to museums, different people. She put me in a camp called the 92nd Street Y, which was a predominantly Jewish camp, and he took me upstate, and I seen different things. So she exposed me to a lot, exposed me to a lot of different people. So I got to see what different cultures' core values are.
Right.
And then you go back home and you realize that our core values in my neighborhood are not the same. You know, and that's when I started to adapt and mold different things from other cultures and say, that's what I want to be a part of me, and not just stay in Harlem, but move beyond it. And that's when I coined the phrase of, you know, let me flip the table on people and tell them exactly, not necessarily, you know, everybody's trying to smooth you and do all these different things. And I was just like, hey, can you help me carry a briefcase? Show me how you're going to do that. You know, when it's my turn to turn pro, if I'm a 4-year player, I'm fine with that. But if you have a chance to lead early, be honest with me and tell me that time. And Coach Pitino was the only one that said, you know what, I can help you. And I said, okay. Went for a visit to University of Kentucky, and I told Coach Pitino, don't take me during the basketball season, put me during football season. And he was like, why is that? I said, well, if I'm out there playing basketball, I can care less about the environment. I'm going to be busy. I want to see how it is when I'm not playing basketball, when I have to go to class and be a part of the university. What does this look like? You know?
So smart.
And so he brought me into a football game and stuff like that. And, you know, I had a host and all these different things. And on that Saturday morning at 8:00, me and Coach Pitino had a breakfast meeting after one of my hosts took me out to a party. I actually walked home for the party that night, because I didn't really want to stay without the host.
Right.
Pitino was like, hey, listen, what you thinking? And I said, you know what? It was my first official visit in college. And I had 2 others set up, Syracuse and Wake Forest. My mom really wanted me to go to Wake Forest. And I said to Coach Pitino, I'm coming. And he said, really? I thought, yeah. He said, you don't want to take any other visits? And I said, no, I don't need to, you know. And he said, it's just been day one. What made you decide that you want to come? I said, first of all, I can care less where I'm at. As long as I got a TV and a basketball, I'm good. You know? And he's like, okay. And then I said, also the other thing about it, you said you can help me become a professional basketball player. And he used to do these things, and he was the first teacher that I had and now people have adopted him and other people have carried it on by being basketball trainers. His thing was called individual instruction. And that was separate from practice. And what he loved about me was I was a versatile player. And I was one of the original guys that at my size could handle the ball and play like a point guard.
I actually saw a quote today where Coach Pitino said that you could play all 5 positions.
Yeah, all 5 position. In New York City, I was ranked during my senior year as the top in all 5 positions. I think 40 other guys in Division I as well, and I was Player of the Year for New York City at that particular time. So
wow,
I did that, and I said, Coach, I want to come, and he said I can help you. And then, long story short, we went through the process, and I went through my junior year, and at the end of my sophomore year, we played in a Duke Kentucky game when Christian Laettner hit the shot. And everybody considers that the best college basketball team of all time. And,
it's up there.
And Coach Pitino calls me in the office a week later and says, you have an invite to play against the first dream team in La Jolla, San Diego. And I said, okay. Went out there and played against the first dream team. We actually beat them the first day.
The Olympic Dream Team?
Yeah, Michael Jordan and all
Yeah.
that.
My goodness.
Was that your first time playing against Jordan?
It was my first time playing against Jordan, but I played against other pros at the University of Kentucky, Rex Chapman, Kenny Walker.
Right.
And even in New York City, played against some pros in the summertime. So
tell the truth. Were you nervous when you played against Jordan? Tell the truth, Jamal. Were you nervous?
So to give you a frame of reference on why I was not nervous and the rest of my cast of characters were not nervous. Chris Webber, Allen Houston, Penny Hardaway, Rodney Rogers, just to name a few. It's only 8 of us, and Grant Hill played on that team, and Bobby Hurley, a Duke, played on that team as well.
What an 8, though. My God.
Oh my God.
And we were coached by another coach. His name was Roy Williams, that coached at the University of North Carolina.
Right.
And Chuck Daly and Mike Krzyzewski were the head and assistant coach.
Right. All Hall of Fame coaches.
Yeah.
Coaches. And the reason why we were not nervous was because if people recall back in then, that was kind of, the Olympics was kind of the rite of passage. And that was something that all young players wanted to play against. They took that away from us. And they gave us a bonus that come practice with us.
Right.
So we were like, okay, all right, we're going to come practice. We're going to come practice,
So, yeah.
And so the practice is more like a scrimmage or whatever. And one thing about me is that it was a point in time where I was like, you know what? I'm not nervous. I'm going to go out here and prove myself.
I got you.
And see what I got and see how it measures up. And we beat them that first day. They kicked our ass the rest of the week. But after coming back, I want to say probably about 2 days later, I'm taking summer school classes, and a manager comes into class and has me leave class, said, Coach Pitino wants to see you. And I'm like, well, what's this? What's the urgency? Coach Pitino pulls me in the office, and he was like, hey, remember when I was recruiting you and you told me to be honest with you when it's your time to leave? And this is the summer before my junior year. And he goes, we're going to announce today that you're turning pro after your junior year. And that was unique from the standpoint that we were going to announce it before the season. And
yeah, I've never heard that before.
Yeah. And the reason why we decided to do it that way was because he knew I was going to get questions throughout the year on if I'm turning pro or not. So
Right.
he preempted
Took the pressure away.
Yeah, I said, hey, you turning pro. And I said, can I call my mom? He's like, go ahead, call her. And and he said, well, if we get to hopefully we get to the championship game, we're going to sit down and I'm going to help you through the process of hiring an agent, and you want to carry a briefcase. I said, yeah, we're going to hire a business manager for you as well. And I said, okay. Fast forward, we get to the Final Four. We lose to the Fab Fives in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And we stay for the game, and then Coach Pitino flies us all back on that Tuesday, and we have meetings set up on Wednesday. He brings 4 agents in the room. At that
This
time,
is the kicker.
I hire one. And then he brings 4 business managers on a separate day, that Thursday, into the room, and I individually interview them. 3 or 4 business managers didn't really gel with me because they didn't listen to what I wanted. And what I wanted at that time was I wanted to retire after my first contract. And at that time, Robert, they were giving lengthy deals, 10 years, whatever, with options. And I said, I want to retire after my first contract and I want to step into a live active business. And 3 to 4 guys, they were just showing me their return on the stocks and bonds. They didn't listen. And one guy listened. He was a 33-year-old master's in finance, a CPA, and was the CFO for oil and gas brokerage company in Nicholasville, Kentucky, and over sales, Kentucky. And I hired him on the spot. And he said, I don't know, why did you hire me? And I said, but there's one caveat. And he said, what's that? I said, you got to teach me everything you know about finance and teach me everything you know about accounting. And I hired you. And he said, deal. And that's who we did. And we've been business partners for the last 26 years. And
Still to this day, they're still together in every single thing we do. They're who we vacation with, who we boat with, who we talk to, like amazing.
And
That's amazing.
so the agent process, what happened was I had one agent come into the room, and that was the guy that I hired. Because at that time, he's like, you got to have somebody certified with you at that particular time. And the guy I hired, we're sitting at a dinner table, and I've been chatting with Rick the whole time and different things like that. And we're sitting at the table, and the guy goes, well, what are you thinking? And I'd already got drafted at this particular time. I was 4th overall pick. I got selected by the Mavericks.
Yeah.
And he says, what number are you thinking? I said, I want $30 million. And he was like, the agent was like, 30 billion. Wow, okay. And so he took and went back to the Dallas Mavericks at that time. And their owner, Don Carter, and the general manager was a guy by the name of Nora Sanju. The agent comes back to me and comes back and says, I got you 19 and a half. And I said, and he thought I should be happy with that. And I was like, I got up from the table, and Rick came with me, and I said, fire him.
They fired the agent.
Yeah. And he said,
At that moment,
yeah, at that moment. And then we sent him a letter and then fired him. And I was like, why is that? And he was like, Jamal said he wanted 30. And so what he didn't realize was how much research should I do? And back then, we didn't have access to the internet. But what I did have was I had Jimmy Jackson. Jimmy Jackson went 4th overall to the Dallas Mavericks the year before him. And he had sat out, and he only played, I think, 18 games. And guess what his number was? 19 million.
right,
$500,000 more than Jimmy Jackson.
right.
And I was like, nah. And they offered me, and I knew I was right because they offered me, because as I mentioned, they had connections to Carbons. They offered me 19 and a half and tried to sweeten the pot and wanted to give me 3 Lotuses vehicles. You're right. I can go buy my own. I don't need that.
Right.
And, so we fired him, and I said, Rick, you got to go in there and do the deal. 2 weeks later, he comes back and he says, Jamal, guess what? I got a number for you. I said, okay, what's the number? I got 33 and a half. What you want to do?
Wow.
Rick had never negotiated an NBA contract in his life.
Yeah. And
So Rick Pitino,
No, Rick Avar, the guy he hired as his business
The
agent.
business partner.
Rick
Okay,
Pitino was
so-
his coach. There's 2
okay,
Ricks.
so Rick, your business partner, Ava, his last name is Ava?
Avar.
Avon. Rick Avar, who was your business partner, now became your agent.
Oh, never was my agent.
Okay, he just negotiated your first contract.
Correct.
And then you hired another agent.
Nope.
You just went all with your career with no agent.
I went on all of my career with no agent. And when I got traded to, so my story is when I went to the Dallas Mavericks, I signed that deal. And how I got to Miami, They had sold the team, the Dallas Mavericks did, from Don Carter. He kept a small percentage to Ross Perot Jr.
Right.
And Ross Perot Jr., he bought other minorities on they own piece of the club or whatever.
Yeah.
Small pieces of the club. I became good friends with a gentleman by the name of Frank Zaccanelli, which was one of the minority owners that came in with Ross Perot Jr. We sat there and chatted. I was one of the first guys that had microfracture knee surgery.
Yeah.
And Frank Zaccanelli was like, "Hey, Jamal, what are you thinking?" I came back from that injury and I said, "Hey, man, I think I want to get out of here." And he kind of, was like, "Do you want to stay?" And then I was like, "Nah, I don't want to stay. Here are my reasons." And he couldn't doubt the reasons that I was saying. I said, "I just think we all need to move on and get a fresh start. You got a new ownership group. It's time to move on." And he said to me, "Where do you want to be?" And I said, "Well, I got two clubs in mind, Indiana Pacers and Larry Brown, and the Miami Heat and Pat Riley." And he said, "Why do you want to play for them?" I said, "Well, because of your guys' disorganization, I want to go to a professional organization and really understand professional sports." Right. And I think Larry Brown at the helm in Indiana and Pat Riley will offer that to me. He comes back to me a couple of weeks later and says, "We got Miami, deal done." And me and him parted ways, and we're still good friends to this day. And that's how I got to Miami. So getting to Miami, I had to sign a 7-year deal. And so I was coming up on, I think it was year 6. And I played in the playoffs against the Detroit Pistons, and I hit a game-winning shot. And it's on, Missy, you might know of this, the game-winning shots against the Pistons, and it was Grant Hill and all those guys. And we get to the second round. And everybody was happy and excited and all these different things. And I walked right into Pat Riley's office right after the game and was like, "What's up with the extension?" And he started hemming and hawing, because I caught him off guard.
Right.
And that's when I knew my final days in Miami were over. And because that group that we had with myself, Tim Hardaway, Alonzo, we had spent 3 or 4 years together and couldn't quite get over the hump because of Michael Jordan, also the New York Knicks. So I knew it was coming to an end. And he wound up trading me to the Charlotte Hornets. And Pat sent me a nice little note and said, "Hey, listen, I know I'm going to regret this." And we played them that next year in the playoffs. Charlotte Hornets against the Miami Heat, and we wound up sweeping them in the playoff. And then before we swept them in the playoffs, I had walked into Bob Bass, the president of the Charlotte Hornets office, after the training camp, my first training camp with them. I think it was 2 weeks in the training camp. And I walked in his office. He said, "Jamal, what can I do for you?" I said, "Bob, man," and this is my exact language. And, I don't change language or anything for anybody. I said, "Bob, you like me?" He's like, "Yeah, we love you. Yeah." I said, "I like you." I said, "Okay." I said, "Man, maximum years, maximum money." I called Rick up, and Bob Bass told me, "Done deal. Let's get it done."
Wow.
And 24 hours later, max money, max years. And there it was. So that's how I negotiated the second one.
Now, this is a man that, listen, I know people are listening to this thinking like, "Wow, my head is spinning. This is insane." But he spun me around from the day I met him. I don't know if you guys know, but I was introduced to him on a blind date by another U of M alumni, Alex Frazier. And Alex and I met I met him during an Orange Bowl game at Dolphin Stadium. So thank God I was a Dolphin cheerleader and I got the intro to Jamal Mashburn. But what blew my mind was on our first date, this man was sitting across the table from me, listing out his core values, just listing out who he was and what he was about and how he's known exactly who he was since he was 10. And I don't remember anything from when I was 10. So I never really believed him until I've started living with him and seeing everything he told me on that one date come to fruition. And what always blows my mind is, how does a boy whose father left him at the age of 10 to be the man of the house, who ends up being a latchkey kid raised by his mom in the projects in Harlem, know just how to even establish a set of core values for himself? You have always seemed so mentally strong to me. And it's just mind blowing because, I've dated people before you, and no one's ever come to me with a set of core values. And I didn't even coin it like that about myself when I met you.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, you dated the wrong people. Second of all,
Crispy,
You're right.
Crispy,
You're
remember
correct.
that one.
You're right.
Remember that one.
You're always right. Happy house, happy spouse.
Jamal says his wife dated the wrong people. Am I write that one down?
Every spouse says that about their spouse. To be honest.
it is, for me, I've always started with mind, body, soul at the end of the day, you know, and I'm a true believer in that if you're going to work your body out, you got to work your mind out, and also have a coach for that as well. So I have 2 therapists in my phone, in my phone that I can call at any particular time. And why that became important for me was something in my spirit always told me that, you know, life is about a series of transitions. How do you manage those transitions? How do you manage the journey? And I've always thought as myself is, okay, well, if I'm a professional athlete and I'm transitioning to the business world, there's certain things in my core values that I have to stick true and honest to. And some of my core values are honesty, transparency, perseverance, courage, just to name a few. And anything that defers or people who kind of counter that, that means we're not in the same space. And we got to part each other. Doesn't mean I'm right. Doesn't mean they're right. Doesn't mean they're wrong. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. It's just that that's how I choose to live my life. And when you're part of a series of transitions going from Harlem to Lexington, Kentucky, college basketball, NBA, and then transitioning into the business world, I don't think that person has a consistent foundation, but there's certain things that you have to leave behind. You know, being a professional athlete, it's one of those things where everything's catered towards you. You don't have to do much and different things like that. Everything's structured for you. And when to be in practice. But the one thing you figure out in the pros is practice is only, at least for NBA, depending upon what organization you go to, it's only 2 or 3 hours a day, if that.
Right.
So what are you doing for the rest of your day?
Right.
And that's how I started to look at it was, okay, well, what did I do in college? What can I take from college to transfer to pros? And one thing that I came up was I was always a student athlete. So, okay, why don't I become a business professional athlete? And so the days that I wasn't participating in basketball on a practice court, me and Rick were drilling on cash flow statements, balance sheets, looking at different opportunities, really chatting about it, and really spending a lot of time on it. So it empowered and also impacted and also filled time in that day where I didn't have to do anything else. I'm not a shopper. I didn't go to the mall. I didn't do all those different things. So my time was always spent as I grew up going to class and playing sports. All I did was take my own class, my businesses, and apply it and connect it to the professional sport. So when that time for me to transition, I was already pretty savvy and educated. So I was able to transition, but I had to leave away certain things in professional sports, which were the things we conversated in the locker room about. You know, you can't take that into your corporate America or your business structure because you have an HR issue. How you dress, what your body looks like, your mannerisms, the content of language, your vocabulary, what you lean on as a crutch. It just can't be how many points you scored. You got to tell me who, what, when, why, and why it's important. So all these different things allowed me to transition, but also discard certain things and really evaluate myself. Am I mentally healthy to partake on this? Am I spiritually right? Am I physically right? Am I educated on this matter? You know, so I've always taken the journey as a person that I'm a lifelong learner. I take things very seriously as far as transitions are concerned, as far as what I need, knowledge base, who do I need around me? And they have to obviously fit within those core values or we just won't mesh.
Wow.
That was a tough blind date for me to pass.
That's a tough.
Well, it sounds like you did pretty well.
One thing I want to say is, Jamal, you are so sharp The fact that you remember all of those names. I'm sitting here and you're going through all of these names. I can't remember half of the coaching staff that was on the University of Miami coaching staff when I played.
He forgets nothing, Robert. Nothing. Nothing.
You were saying names, and I'm saying to myself, man, you're at an organization and you had a short stint, and you were saying names and the owner's name, and I'm saying to myself, this guy, you're extremely sharp. And now, like everyone, a lot of times when we are interviewing people or I come across different athletes, we all talked about, hey, you know what, CTE, football, blah, blah. Dude, you are extremely sharp, and I'm so I now understand the level of commitment that you put into not being a great basketball player, but being an overall great person in business and everything that you came in contact with. Yeah. That to me is absolutely, that's just off the charts. But I want to get into one thing. Number one, you had these 4 basic business managers that you had to choose from. Dude, if you'd have chose any other person, your life may have been different. Your process of going through choosing, dude, it says something about what you were looking for at that young age, and to pick the right person and go down that 1 out of 4, that 25% chance that you were going to pick the right person and that would change your life. I applaud that.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
But the next question I have for you is, for all of the athletes out there, whoever, any young person that has that early stage of life of success, financial success in sports or entertainment, Hollywood or wherever, what is the best advice that you can give them to start a business while they're playing? Because you did it while you were a professional athlete, and you had Rick with you.
Before he inked his first deal, before he even signed an NBA contract business-wise. This is a great question. Yeah.
Right. So what's your best advice in layman terms that you can give a young athlete that is coming into, NIL money, they have some funds going into the pros? What's the best advice you can give them in terms of starting a business and why it's so important?
Well, I think the first answer, you got to realize that you are a business. I think that's the first thing that you have to come to terms, that you are a business at this particular point. If you have a chance to be at the professional level now with NIL, somebody has deemed your service with an attachable monetary value.
Right.
So that's the first part of it. But also, when you lead up to that, when you talk about my memory, how did I acquire that? That was sports. My whole thing was, hey, listen, you calling me a play? I'm going to know my play.
Right.
And so I took it to another level, was like, not only do I know my play and where everybody's supposed to be, I know everybody else's play.
Right.
The reason why I know everybody else's play, because I want them not to fuck up my play.
Right.
You know what I mean? Don't mess my player. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I developed kind of I don't know if you could develop, or I was innate with it or whatever, sort of I wouldn't say photographic memory, but my memory works in videos. It's like a loop, reels,
you got your memory's different.
Yeah. And so I'm able to remember plays. I remember situations. Even when I'm talking to my son, we were just at Temple University and he plays there. I can talk to him. Do you remember at a minute 55 when the score was 64-61 and you shot the 3? I would have done it differently because of time and score, and then build it there. That's how I educate, to put people in a place where they can actually remember that time.
Wow.
And most people remember stories. They don't remember stats. But in Bailey, she introduced me to this thing called feelings. Um,
When I met him, he could only name 5 feelings. I was
That's
blown
very
away.
common.
And he couldn't believe that I knew like 100. And I was like, oh my gosh, what we're gonna have to fix
That's
it.
good. You both helped each other.
yeah, so in understanding that, she helped me understand that people remember things on about how you feel as well. They don't just remember the date. So for me, you just progress along. And then also with young people, I think you have to have, I work at it like this, and I tell young people, what's your vision? Okay, tell me why you want that. And don't tell me why you want that because of X, Y, and Z. There's no right or wrong answer. It could be for the money, it could be the same, it could be for all
Right.
those. But tell me why you want it. And let's get deep about that. Then if you tell somebody, the athlete tells you why you want it, okay, are you willing to do the work that you need to do to get to your vision? Here's the work that's required. Are you willing to do that? Some of them say, yeah. And then I ask them another question. What do you enjoy more, games or practice? A lot of people say games. I said, it's not going to be strong enough.
Hmm.
You really got to enjoy practice.
Right.
You want to be practicing more than you play. And if you don't enjoy practice, ain't going to be no money in the world that's going to get you up to go out there and continue to work. Because once you get the money, and it's a phrase that Coach Kitchen used for me, he was like, you know what, Jamal? I heard this from Marvin Hagler, the boxer. It's awfully hard to do road work when you sleep in the silk sheets.
Right. Right.
So I think, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if your why was the silk sheets, you just gonna turn over and hit snooze.
Right.
But if your why was internal, that you want to accomplish something and to be the best version of yourself, that's a different motivation.
Right.
You know? And so I tell a lot of athletes, what's your why? Because you got to also know when to enter and know when to exit. We never leave on our own terms, but you have to leave on your own terms.
Right.
Important for you to leave. And I'm a big believer, don't stay when the lights in the club come on late at night. You know what I mean? And that works
Right.
well with athletes as well, you know, because that's when things are problematic. But for athletes starting a business, I do the exact opposite. Why do you want to start a business? Well, that's what I'm told I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what you're supposed to do. You can create an organization. You can be a philanthropist. There's a lot of things. You can go back into the community. You can serve different people, or you can just chill. There's no wrong answer. Usually what you find is athletes are trying to make up for what they've already lost.
Right.
That's why they want to get into business. That's not
But it's
strong.
that identity piece, right? It's like trying to re-identify yourself beyond being an athlete, I think, right? Or no?
I think, you know, when you grow up aspiring to be a professional athlete, you go through a process from 5th grade on. You know, guys, I mean, there's a trajectory of guys that you play with, especially if you're really good nationally. You know everybody. Everybody knows everybody.
Right.
At least your competitors. The identity part is more wrapped up in what you've been conditioned to think of who yourself is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's why when you look at athletes, a lot of athletes think they're in business because they've branded themselves. That's their identity. But they're not really in business. They're just in marketing. That's a component of business.
Right.
And a lot of them think that they're in business, but no, you're just licensing it out for different things. You're not really building an organization, selecting people, a part of the strategy and all these different things. They hand you something. Do you want to promote this item? We'll give you a little bit of equity right now, but your equity has no voting rights. Go on. And a lot of them think they're in business. And that's where it becomes problematic when your identity no longer can create the value of what you expect in return. That's why when you look at ESPN, I worked with ESPN for after I retired for 2 years because I was a communication major. I just want to put it to use, but it also gave me great insight into the media business. And if you look at ESPN, how they go about it, it's always the athlete that is relevant and recently retired. It's not the guys that stay along over a long period of time actually have to figure out how to be a media person,
Right.
right? To be a good writer or a staff of writers behind you, thoughtful content. How much time do I have on air to deliver a message? And when I went up to ESPN, Reginald Kitchen introduced me to a writer. His name is Preacher Moss. He's a comedic writer, Islamic comedian, and he wrote for George Lopez.
Great comedian.
Right.
And he would come down here to Miami. And before I took the job at ESPN, I negotiated that contract on my own too. I can tell you a story about that one as well. They wouldn't.
That's great.
And they didn't expect, when you sit on the other side of a negotiating table, they didn't realize what was valuable to me.
Right.
They thought the money was the value to me. I'm like, nah, I'm good with that. Whatever you offer, I'm good with that. The one thing I negotiated was there's a penalty in the contract that says if you leave, you have to pay them a certain X amount, like 50, 75,000 or whatever, because they feel like if you're on the ESPN platform, you can potentially get a job in the NBA or whatever.
Right.
So I negotiated that out. And they had this other clause there where you had to give a certain amount of notice or whatever. So after my 2 years, I had an issue with a production team. And I said, I'm done. I'm leaving. And I'm up in Bristol. And the guy goes, well, you can't leave. Your contract says such and such and such. And I had a friend of mine, became a friend of mine. He's Jerry Madelon. And
before you go on, what was the issue with the production team that made you want to leave?
Well, when you get up, as you're in media, you start to realize that it's not necessarily about the content you want to talk about. It's the content that the viewers need to hear in order to.
Right.
So if you watch ESPN now, they're always talking about a few teams. Cowboys,
right?
Lakers.
Yep.
LeBron.
Yeah.
And if you just do the math.
Right.
Those are the teams that draw the most coverage.
Right.
And remember TNT had this phrase called "We like drama." That's what I coined. That's, to me, media and sports has now become watching the car crash, essentially.
Right.
They want you to tune in. And I understand that advertisers play a role, different things like that. So I was like, yo, I want to leave. And I also countered them with, hey, listen, I'll pay for me to do a satellite feed from here in Miami and buy my own studio and have my own sponsors, as long as it aligns with you guys. And they were like, nah, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, cool. And come to find out in COVID, that's what it came to, where people satellite stuff. And I was ahead of it at that particular time. But sitting in the office with Jerry Madelon, he was sitting there and he reviewed the contract and he was like, guys, he can leave whenever he wants. I said, Jerry, my man, I'll talk to you tomorrow by phone. And I'm out. And that's when I left the ESPN. And they actually wanted me to stay a little bit longer, but I was just like, this is just not for me at this particular time. It was hard to leave Miami to travel up to Hartford, especially with kids. It was very difficult. But, for me, it's just like you learn along the way. And I'm unafraid to try new things or to knock on the door. I'm unafraid of a no. I'm not afraid of a yes either. I'm not afraid of a maybe. I'm pretty convicted. I learn along the way and I move forward. But I often tell younger people and guys is that I'm not the type that's going to tell you to save your money. I'm not going to tell you that. The reason why I'm not going to tell you that, because I probably came from a similar background that they came to, where I couldn't find a size 16 when I was younger, a 16 shoe when I was younger. And I remember getting into the NBA, and they used to have this store, they still do, I think, in Atlanta, called Freeman's, where they would sell big shoes.
Yeah.
For 1 year, I held the record for the biggest purchase of shoes. My bill, $47,000.
Wow.
And Rick called me. He's like, "You got a bill for $47,000?" Missy, Kathy, and Robert, they were all gators in all colors, from tie-ups to strap-ons.
Because it needed something to fit.
And also, I never had an opportunity at that particular time to buy shoes that I liked at my sneakers.
Right.
And so
Wow.
I figured that at that particular time, I can make purchases because there's certain things that I desire that need to fill a hole. But after I make that purchase, you start to sit back and say, okay, do I need to make another purchase like that? It filled that hole, but it didn't necessarily bandage up the wound.
Right.
And what it was just being lack of, not having it, And then you start to make decisions differently as you make purchases. I think all guys need to go through a period of where they're spending certain things because that's the transition from the old to where you're at now. And if you don't spend it or don't feel you're going to spend it somewhere else down the line. You know what I mean? So I'm just a big believer of learning and educating yourself and just making sure that you're, especially when you get to professional sports or college. Professional sports and college are the same right now. It's all professional sport. It's been that for a long period of time. Nobody just wanted to talk about it. You have to really decide in your mind on what your vision is and how you want to live life in your 60 as opposed to 20. Right. And if you answer that why, you can get to that 60 place without even knowing it. Because now you have purpose.
Right.
And I think most guys, and I spoke to a professional football player a while ago, and he actually got into financial planning. His uncle, his father-in-law is in the Technology Hall of Fame. He's one of the guys that created, when Apple was coming out with stores, he was the guy that created those Apple stores early on when they were fixing computers, not the big Apple stores now. He created that mechanism. And he's in the Technology Hall of Fame. And the professional athlete said something to me one day. He was like, Jamal, and his father brought me over to Naples to chat with him. And I said, well, what's the issue? And the young man said, I feel like I reached my dream at 20 years old. What else do I have to look forward to? And I said to him, well, shit, do you have a wife, your kid? Got that to look forward to. And what he was really saying was his purpose all along was to play, but then when it ended, he didn't have another purpose.
Right.
And it didn't feel the same. And I chatted with him as, let's get out of our feelings and let's get to the plot, and you can be successful in other areas by taking things away from your football career and apply to your new life.
Right.
What you want. And create the same milestones and accomplishments along the way that have that same feeling. You may not get 60,000 people cheering for you, but you can have your young son cheering for you when he wants to be like you, not the professional athlete, but the financial planner. He's going on his business, certified financial planner tenfold.
Wow.
That's amazing. And I have to tell you, Jamal, I admire that you have done so much work for your whole life. You've really lived a sort of masterclass of knowing who you are, of being true to yourself. And I love this topic of purpose because I do think a lot of times people tie it to a specific event or a specific thing, or they tie their identity to a specific event or a specific thing. And the thing is about that, just like your spirit spoke to you, life is a series of transitions. And so our purpose is always transitioning as we transition, right? And I like to think of purpose as really being who we are, right? So like when I'm working with someone and they're struggling with where they are and maybe they're making that transition out of sports and they're quite not sure what to do, and maybe there's a big picture, but they haven't quite reached that yet. And a lot of athletes and really high achievers are really big on achievement. So you get kind of antsy waiting to make that achievement and the small wins don't really count, right? So, but it's like, can you live your purpose today by being a good friend? Can you send a text message that makes somebody feel good? Like, how can you really live that? So I love that you talk about these things. I love the mind, body, soul approach. I love that Bailey introduced the emotional part of that because I always like to say mind, body, soul, emotions. I love that you shared that you have 2 therapists in your phone. I mean, this is like so incredible. So one thing I know we're coming up towards the end of our show today. I have one more question after this, but one question that I want to ask in regards to mental health is, what does mental health mean to you as an individual, like as a man? And what does mental health mean to you as a father? And what I mean by that is sometimes mental health might mean the same thing as it does for you as a man and as your father, as a father. And sometimes it might mean one thing for you, but then different for what you want to teach your children or how you approach it with your children based on, kind of what you've learned in life and how you want to approach things, right? So what is that for you? What is mental health for you as a father and as a man?
Great question. I think as a man that's evolved over a period of time based upon the generation that I grew up in, and me being 51 years old, and mental health wasn't a thing that people talked about or identified. When I was growing up, it was either, oh, that person's crazy. It was almost like in sports where, there's a trick in sports where when people say my back hurt, the reason why they say their back hurt because you really can't diagnose the back. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like a car accident.
Or the groin.
You really can't diagnose it. It's up to the individual.
I know this.
And ready to go out there and play, and different things like that. So I think for me, that it's changed over time. And one of the reasons why it's changed over time for me as a man is because of having kids as well. And having to realize that just because I did it a certain way doesn't make it the right way for them. Environment, different set of circumstances, different pressures, different distractions. So for me as a man, I take mental health pretty seriously because I learned quite early on that exercise was one of the best forms of therapy for me. And Bailey knows my history. I started playing basketball because I failed at baseball. That was my first business decision, was that I was in love with baseball. I grew up right across the river from Yankee Stadium.
Wow.
Yeah. So Con Edison used to give out $5 bleacher seats. And I was one of those kids that would sit right behind Dave Winfield. And I actually met Dave Winfield a couple of times, once at ESPN. And I wanted to be a baseball player. My father took me to a tryout. I failed at that. And then I made a promise on the way home to myself that I will never be unprepared for an opportunity again in life.
What position in baseball did you like?
Robert, that's how bad I was at baseball. You know what I mean? So growing up in New York City, in Harlem, we didn't play regular baseball. We played stickball.
Stickball, yeah. In the street.
Yeah. So when you transfer to real baseball and you have a glove in your hand and it's situational, it's a much different game.
Yeah.
And I didn't grow up playing that, and I had nobody to teach me that. So when my dad took me to that, I was unprepared, and I never wanted to feel that feeling again. Right. And then I went out on the basketball court, and I never owned the basketball. It was a community basketball. So the rule was, if you're the last one to leave when the lights cut out of the court, you had to be the first guy out there in the morning.
Because you had the ball.
Yeah, with the ball. So I did that and just worked on my game that particular way. But what drove me there was that my mom and dad had divorced. Or back then separated. So I was angry as a kid. And I had to figure a way out how to channel that anger, because I also went from a kid that was lively, upbeat, to a kid that was very stoic. I was deeply hurt at that particular time. And I had nobody to talk to. I'm the only child. My mom had to work and different things like that. So when my dad left the house, I had to channel it somewhere. And I didn't want to play with people or be judged for not being good because of that baseball experience. So I used to play by myself. And that's where I'm very visual. Like, if you show it to me, I'll wreck it out. Okay, I got it. And so for me, looking back at my past, I started to understand different connectors that apply to what I do now. I still play basketball 3 times a week, but I don't play 5-on-5s. I hired a trainer. He works out a lot of pros and college kids and stuff like that. And we get after it for an hour.
That's awesome.
So, instead of me rebounding my shot, I got other rebounders now because I can afford it.
But the exercise is like like
Yeah.
mind-blowingly mentally changing. Like if he leaves here, like, sorry to put this out there, babe, but if we're in an argument and then we settle it, you know how like you settle an argument with your spouse, but you guys are still like kind of tense, like everything's still kind
Yeah.
of like weird. He'll leave and go play basketball and come back like a totally different person. And then
Yeah.
just like, ooh, I'm like, who's this? And then now I'd be like, you should go for a walk.
So to answer your question, Misty, I learned a lot from my kids on how I wanted to parent them.
Yeah.
My biggest fear was of starting the process of my earlier marriage was that I didn't want to end up like my mom and dad separated.
Right.
That happened. And I took my role seriously. I took care of my kids' custody and different things like that, and really raised them and really started to try to understand and listen from what perspective they're coming from. And that's when Bailey joined the process and introduced me to feelings, because I was the type of person, because I walked solo but had people help me along the journey, I was very steadfast in that I can accomplish anything. But then I realized that I don't have those soft skills, and I need to have somebody either teach me that or partner with me to help me understand that. So I started to parent my kids a lot more different and have conversations with them like my mom did at 10. My mom no longer talked to me at 10 years old. My father left the house. She's like, I can't talk to you as a child. I got to talk to you as an adult. So I grew up fast.
Right.
Fast. And so I chat with my kids under that same moniker. It's like, hey, listen, I can't talk to you as a child. I got to talk to you as an adult, but I got to soften that up to a degree where they understand what their core values are. I don't lecture them on what mine are. I have them tell me what theirs are.
Right.
And something I share with my son, because he's the basketball player and I started with him at 9 years old. And the only reason I started with him at 9 years old is because he said he wanted to do it.
Right.
Right.
I said, hey, listen, man, you want to do this? Why are we doing this? And what do you want to accomplish? Now, he's like, I want to be a pro. I said, okay, give me 3 years and I'll have you one of the top kids in the country. My only caveat is I can't ask you to go work out. You got to come to me.
Right.
And he did. And he's a hard worker. But along that particular journey, I started to coin the phrase, we're building a car. And he used to sit there and look at me, we're building a car. Said, I'm going to help you with this engine. I'm going to help you with the outside and all these different things. Within those 3 years, we're going to be riding in the car. I might take control of the wheel and different things like that, but then it's going to switch where I'm in the passenger seat.
Right.
And driving. And then he goes, okay. And then I said, then I'm going to switch from the passenger seat and just be your navigational system. And he was like, okay, what do you mean by that? I said, well, in a navigational system, now you have autonomy.
Right.
You can see the direction, but you can also take a right early and it will recalculate. And as you recalculate, I'm just going to sit there and say, hey, this is down this path if you recalculate.
Right.
And then I'll be completely out of the car and I might be just in the back seat, just watch.
Right.
When he gets older. And that has come to fruition with him because he jumped into the transfer portal at the end of the year himself. Didn't know me. I got a call from a coach at Temple University. He used to play with me up in New York, and he coached down near University of Miami. I'm the Jim Larinaga at the University of Miami.
Yeah, I know Jim.
And he was like, hey, your son's in the transfer portal. I said, I didn't know. And he, really? I said, I didn't know. And he was like, we really would like that. And I said, Jay, call Jay up. And I said, I got a call from Temple University. And he said, Dad, I'm getting a bunch of calls from a lot of universities. And he took the bull by the horns. And now I was in the backseat.
I was just about to say, your son is really following, you did a lot of things on your own coming up. He's just following your lead.
Yeah, following the lead. But my biggest thing is, and it's something that Coach Kitchen said to me about basketball. And he said, Jamal, you know the great ones, and you're one of the great ones, even though they don't acknowledge you as the great ones, because you have a certain signature to your game.
Right.
That crossover.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
The Rucker Park crossover.
if you utilize the signature, for me to say that's your imprint on the game, that's what you give in the game. And going back to earlier, where basketball is just a backdrop of life, it's your signature to your life. You know, I remember sitting in class, you know, doing cursive of what my autograph is going to look like.
Ah, that's awesome.
I did that too.
And what that represented,
Me too.
what that represented for me and me and Jay, and also Taylor, and also the blended family that we have, was, what's your signature to life, and what are you offering, and what are you standing? And comes back to your foundational piece. So for him, it was like, yeah, you followed, I just gave you a piece of my process. Now it's time for you to implement it and create your own signature, because now you own it. It's not because I gave it to you. You earned it and you own it. And one thing that I found about young people, and what people in general, is most people want ownership of their lives.
Yes.
To make their choices. And they're just trying to come to a place of how do they make that happen. Some people do it to the detriment of others. Some people do it to the benefit of others. But everybody wants ownership of their life and how they make choices. And different. And you look at social media now, everybody has an opinion. Doesn't mean they have all the facts. You know, but they have an opinion. That means they want to be recognized and to be heard, as Bailey would once say to me.
Right.
This feels like a therapy session.
No, I think that's amazing. That's amazing.
Well, Jamal, you know, we're coming to the end. I want to ask a fun question. You played against a lot of great players, man. So we're going to ask a fun question. You played against a lot of great players, and you know, a lot of guys end up in Hall of Fame, and you know, these all-star teams. Name one player you thought didn't get their due, that you thought was a great player and somehow always got passed over. Maybe he should have been in the Hall of Fame. Name one player that you have either played against, watched play, whatever you know, that you thought did not get their due.
To be honest, I mean, the basketball business, the entertainment business, and at the end of the day, when you view it through that particular lens, you realize that there are other factors at play than just performance.
Right.
It has a lot to do with image, what college you went to, who you're connected to, what's your agent, who's pushing for you, and different things like that. At the pro level, there's probably many guys, but I think there are guys that I played against in New York that I thought could have been NBA players.
100%.
And just for a lot of different reasons. And it's something that I share with my son when he's going through his journey. And we went on the AAU circuit when he was, what was he, 10 years old? And I said, Jay, look around. And my process with him was, I'm going to throw you in this fire, and then we're going to come back home and we're going to work on it. Right. Evaluate. You always evaluate, reevaluate, and going back out. And I said, look around the ring. And he's at this camp. And he said, yeah, guys better than me, different things like that. I said, probably about 90% of these kids will not be here as you move forward. And he said, why do you think that? I said, you just look at the pyramid. It goes up. And people get left at the bottom, can't make grades.
Right.
You know, situations off the court happen. A criminal, they either die or something like that.
Right.
And my son has had one teammate who was his best friend at Brewster Academy, Terrence Clark, who passed away before he even got drafted. He was recognized as a top 25 guy and was going to get drafted, and was out in Los Angeles and was killed in a car accident.
Yeah, condolences to his family.
And you know, he was a roommate in my son and Jay's at Brewster Academy, and Jay took that very hard. And not to throw salt in the wound at that particular time with him, but after the emotion kind of got over, I had him recollect, these are some of the things that happened.
Yeah.
You know, you see great players early in their career, but they might not be the pros that you see. You know, nobody knew John Morant was going to be John Morant.
Right.
You know, he went to Murray State University. He didn't go to Duke. Steph
Right.
Curry,
You've been going to a major school.
nobody knows it's all about timing, luck, and also work ethic and where the game is positioned at today. So a couple of guys that I know, I grew up watching. One guy had extended the NBA, and he was the reason why that I wore number 24. And I loved his game so much. And his name was Lloyd Daniels.
Lloyd Daniels.
He was a phenomenal player before he got into drugs and all that stuff. And Jerry Tarkanian loved him so much. He recruited him at UNLV, and he had a drug addiction, went to UNLV, and they couldn't find him one day, and he found himself in the crack house. That's where they found him.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
He was a 6'8" point guard, and he was Magic Johnson with a jump shot.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Later, when Jerry Tarkanian got the job for the San Antonio Spurs, who did he call? Lloyd Daniels.
Right.
Lloyd shell of himself, but he was still a productive player. And he was a guy that I always admired and still chatted with him. And he would give me advice and different things like that. And he was a gaucho. And then another guy who was a great player that nobody on this, probably none of the audience will ever know, is a gentleman by the name of Carlton Hines. And he was 6'5", about 220 pounds. He's the only guy that I knew that when I watched him play, he was like man amongst boys. He would have been the equivalent to LeBron James back in the early 80s, late 80s.
Right. Right.
That size, the physical stature. But Carlton's issue was he became one of New York City's biggest drug dealers. And to the point he was making so much money off the court that it became problematic. And
I make more money playing drugs. Screw basketball.
it became problematic for him, and he tried to come back to play basketball. And even after sitting out for 2 years, he could still suit him up and play. And we just, I knew that we went to a Nike All-American camp up in Princeton, New Jersey, top 100 kids in the country. I went 2 years in a row, my junior and senior year. Carlton shows up my junior year. He's not on the bus ride up there. And at that time, Robbie, you know, this college coaches are not mingle with you or instantly. Everybody like, where's Carlton at? Well, I can't see Carlton. There are 300 coaches sitting up in the stands.
Wow.
Carlton, next to Jim Boeheim, the Syracuse hat. He was like, hey, I'm not playing.
Right.
Years later, well, not years later, Carlton Hines wanted to get shot in the head for robbery. Well, sort of quote robbery. Everybody thinks it was a hit, but probably was a hit. But those are some guys that I played with that if you looked at it, it's like, yo, that's a pro. You know, circumstances, environments, and different things like that take people certain choices. And that's why I'm a big believer in analyzing your choices and really figuring out 360 of what is the impact of that choice, good, bad, or indifferent. So I just don't think at 180. You know, most people, I think at 360. And it's a phrase that I use, and it's something that I share with Bailey, is that, you know, when I look at people, I just don't look at them as an individual. I look at all the people that are unseen that they support and that support them. And I shared this the other day. I think of it as a peacock. You know, when a peacock spreads, those are all the people that are behind the scenes that are not present in people's view that you got to consider when talking to people, when you're positioning things, because the weight that comes along with people supporting other people, I think people should be talking to the whole family rather than just an family. Doesn't necessarily just mean blood, you know. It's the whole frame, because as Reginald Kitchen pointed out to me, that's people's circle of influence.
Yeah.
People's circle of influence rather than just the individual.
Wow.
That
Amazing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I know that, my gosh, we've talked about so much today, But if you have time, I have one more question.
Oh, Bailey's spot. So yeah, I got time. Yeah,
All right, Bailey, do we have time?
You have time.
All right. So one more question. This is sort of a fun question too, but I'm dying to know. And I think it's like a two-part question. How did you get the nickname Monster Mash? And then as I understand it, Mash is a whole different story. So like, how did these come to be? I got to know before we wrap this up.
So this particular building I grew up in is the 159-70. It was a 70 building. I'm the last building in the project. So I had to walk through probably about 8 other buildings that stand similar heights, 14 stories. I lived on the 8th floor, apartment 8E. And my best friend at the time lived in 14H, and his name was Russell. His brother name was Jamal, was younger, about 5 years younger than us. I spent a lot of time with Russell, and his mom one day, she was calling, said, "Hey, Jamal." We both turned around. And she was like, "No, little Jamal." And I said, "Okay." She says, "You know what? I'm going to start calling you Mash." And that's for short for Mashburn.
Oh.
Start calling you that. So throughout my neighborhood, everybody started to call me Mash or Molly or whatever it may be, a combination of Jamal and, whatever. Started calling me Mash. And then one day, I was my sophomore year of high school. People may know of this place. It's a place called City College. It's a college in New York City. And it's not only known for its higher education, but in this particular time, if people remember, that's when Sean P. Diddy Combs, Puffy back then, threw a party. And that's when there were 6 people killed and trampled at that party. And that was at City College.
Wow. Were you at that party?
I knew this was coming.
So I was in high school. This is when he threw his party that particular time, but like consider it like a college party, like I rent out a venue and I throw a party, but it's not a club, but all the street hustlers and everybody would go. City College, I would say probably sat 5,000 people. So it was a big venue. And they hosted at City College in the Christmas time, a tournament called Doc Turner Classic for all the top high schools. People from all over the country would play in New York City at that time. So at that time in New York City and consistently in New York City, you always have a PA announcer, not just announcing fouls and different things like that. He would be commentating the game.
Right.
Such and such, different things to get the crowd involved with stuff like that.
Like they do now.
Yeah. For everybody,
Yeah.
Big name. So I'm playing well as my sophomore year, and he goes, "Monster Mash." Then what happened was the New York Post, they would, back in that day, they would have a high school basketball section. And they would run it. And then at the end of it, Monster Mash has 30-something points. And it's
It's stuck with, that's amazing.
It was printed right after the game in the New York Post. That's incredible.
A lot of people think it's from Kentucky, where they would play the Halloween song.
Monster Mash. Yeah.
They did
the Monster Mash. They did the Monster Mash. Yes.
They adopted it and everything like that. So that's how that came about.
So you were in high school when Monster Mash came to be. That's incredible.
It is funny because, Robert and I have this issue, which is so funny because Robert's name is Robert, and my name is Bailey. So people still cannot get it out of their heads that we don't have the same name just because my first name is his last name. Like they constantly. And so that is so funny because I don't even know what we would do to break that up because it's not actually Jamal and Jamal. Like it's not actually Bailey and Bailey.
Well, it doesn't help that we named the show Bailey and Buck. We should have named it
Bailey and Buck.
Robert Bailey.
Bailey and Buck, like a law firm. Yeah.
Bailey Mashburn Buck. I don't know.
The Bailey's and Buck show. Yeah. It's so funny. Oh my gosh. Well, listen, I am so excited that I had the chance to share my hubby with all of you. Obviously, he's not done talking though, because I got the shut the hell up signal. So go ahead, babes.
One thing I was saying is I live by the street code that you cannot give yourself a nickname. Somebody else has to bestow it upon you.
100%. 100%.
Well, he didn't like when our friend Sean Wolfington renamed us Jamali.
Yeah, that's bad. That's
But
bad. I agree.
that's street code. I
Jamali.
mean, I like Jamali.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
You don't like it. Oh
Yeah,
my
man,
gosh.
that's weird.
So
But
I do like
listen,
Monster Mash.
It's awesome having you, Jamal. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. You were absolutely amazing, and I learned a lot. I'm sure the audience learned a lot. Thank you for opening up about your perspective on mental health and everything. And Bailey, since it's your husband, I'll let you take the show out.
all right. So we're going to close out today the Bailey and Buck Unplugged podcast in support of the Kennedy Kids Foundation. If you're in need of any help, please dial 988 and there will be somebody there available to speak with you. If it is an urgent situation, we always suggest that you dial 911. Reach out to the Kennedy Kids Foundation at kennedykids.org, and one of our fabulous board members will be happy to assist you and your family. As you all know, our mission is to prevent teen suicide and help teens and their families struggling with mental health. This episode, again, was sponsored by How to Wed, planning moments into memories. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you again,
Thank you.
Jamal.
everybody.
I made it through the rough time. I made it through the tough time. I made it through the bad time. So now I gotta get mine. Gotta weather the storm. Gotta get mine.